thank you all for coming. I'm really glad to have this conversation with you. I have talked to so many people after watching The Vow who are so curious about both the sort of personal growth and development aspects of ESP, and also the details that were revealed about DOS and how, what that was like, and questions about, how people got involved in it, and, why you would want to be involved in that, etc. So I am going to open this up to Q&A in about half an hour, but I figured we'll start now. And by the way, to everybody who is on this call and watching, we thought we would have 8 women from DOS, and it's actually 7 because of a very happy reason that one is getting married. So congratulations and mazel tov and best wishes to whoever that is. And so why don't we start? I'm gonna, I don't know what order you see each other in, but I'm just gonna do it in the order that I see you in, because I think that's probably how it will show up recorded. So I'll start with Michelle. Can you just say a little bit about yourself and your background, your education, what drew you to either ESP, if that's how you got into DOS, or just DOS, how you got connected, and what you got out of it, and then what you want people to know that you think they don't know.
Yeah, sure. My name is Michelle Hatchett. I am 34 years old, and I'm a native New Yorker, born and raised here in Harlem, New York. And my background is mostly in education. I've worked in New York City public schools. I was the diversity practitioner at a boarding school, worked with kids in a lot of different capacities. I also have a background in agriculture. I've managed organic vegetable farms and working with women on in those spaces. And I also have a background in hospitality, managing restaurants and in the service industry. So I love bringing people together. I love feeding people's food, good knowledge, all those things, and just really setting a table for people to be with each other. When I was first introduced to ESP, I was working at a boarding school as the director of multicultural affairs. I was very interested in going on to start my own school that would really give students and faculty an opportunity to be in a space where they could really be themselves. And I recognized that I very much wanted to embody the kind of environment and values that I was looking to have be at the foundation of a school that, of course, would be on a farm, and we'd have a restaurant and all those things. And I met someone at a conference, his name is Mark Elliott, who told me about ESP. And I was very attracted to it just because it seemed, I was really looking for mentorship. I was really looking to grow myself. And I was really blown away by the intro, more so than I thought I would be by the introductory courses. Not only did I feel like I had personal transformation, really certain fears and hangups that I had were just not an issue. I also was in an environment that I was like, oh, this is what I'm trying to do. I just didn't realize that there were people already doing it, and that I could be a part of it and add my own flavor and sauce, and continue to grow myself and do this with other people that were very like-minded. So that's kind of how I got started with that. A few years later, in 2015, I was invited by Allison Mack to join DOS. And that came at a time when I really wanted to just kick my growth up a notch. ESP was great. I had a coach who was amazing, but she only could push me as far as I wanted to go. And she asked my mom, I'm hard-headed. I need someone to just tell me what to do, And I knew I wanted to kick things up a notch. I just didn't know what that looked like. And then Allison Mack invited me to lunch and invited me to DOS. And it sounded like everything I wanted, mentorship, one-on-one coaching, let's go, let's do this. And I was like, yeah. And I got so much out of it. I think practicing discipline, really helped me with my commitment issues, just to the smallest things. so that I could build more trust in myself. So if I set a goal, it's like I started to have a more belief in myself that I could actually do what was necessary to achieve those things. And I also really, it changed my relationship with women a lot, working with women, working with Allison, working with women that I invited into the group, caring for people. And also, I didn't feel as fearful of men anymore. You know, I ended up, after everything kind of went south, I got a really great job here in New York City. That was, you know, I was working amongst a lot of men and rose through the ranks very quickly because I think I was just understood, okay, I just got to get to work here, you know, and that's not something I had before. It seems like really simple, but I didn't have that before. And I attribute that a lot to, you know, what I experienced in DOS. And I feel like,
What are the misapprehensions? And then I'm going to go
oh,
to
right. I
Danielle.
knew I was missing one thing.
What are
Yeah,
the
I
things that
think
you think people get from watching the vow that you think are, you know, that to you don't seem consonant with your own experience?
like all of it. But I would say the biggest thing, one, is that it's a sex cult. I honestly don't even know what that is. I wasn't doing any of that. And I think that there was something, you know, like somehow I was duped. You know, this is something I chose. It was a very clear conversation. I knew what I was getting into. I still know, you know, feel very clear that I was given all the information to make an informed decision. And I would say yes again.
So we're going to get back to this. I'm going to ask some questions after everybody speaks. But Danielle, same questions for you. You know, background, education, what, you know, what's your life like? What drew you to, were you part of ESP? What drew you to DOS? What did you get out of it? And what do you think, based on your experience, is not consonant with what people might get out of watching The Vow?
Sure. Well, my name is Danielle Roberts. I'm 39 years old. I guess I've been a body enthusiast kind of my whole life. I did gymnastics for 9 years up to a national level when I was young, and then personal trained and taught aerobics through college and medical school, and graduated with a dual degree in osteopathic medicine and my master's in clinical nutrition in 2008. And I guess my burning question was always like, you know, I was always looking at how to look at the body holistically, how to look at humans holistically. So I was always looking at how does the mind work, how does the emotions work, and how do those relate to physical disease, how do those relate to the body. So I opened up my own corporation in 2013 and have, you know, helped to build a few different businesses since then. I've worked as a medical director, physician, speaker, and educator in my field for quite some time. And I guess really, you know, when I was first, when I first was introduced to ESP, I was teaching classes on how to help people become more responsible for their health and wellness. Everything that I was seeing in the hospitals and a lot of the conventional medicine typically steered people to putting band-aids on their symptoms instead of really trying to understand how those things were happening in their body. What was the cause of those illnesses or the fatigue or whatever was going on? And really what I had become aware of was a good system that I was teaching all of my patients as to how they could really help make their body well. And I was teaching those classes on responsibility and trying to empower people on how to be able to do that. And when I was introduced to ESP, I think what appealed to me the most, I was having this struggle between joy and responsibility. And the more responsibility I took on, the less joyful I felt like I could feel, or the less free I felt like I could feel. And somebody had mentioned to me, well, what if that's not true? Like, what if you don't have to relinquish your responsibility to feel more free in your life? And I think a lot of us feel that way. Like, we go on vacation so we can feel free, right? But like, what are we saying? We're letting go of responsibility of the things we care about the most. So I saw that there was like a disconnect. And that was what really drew me to ESP. I wanted to understand that better. And I did. I found, just like Michelle mentioned, I found a community of like-minded people that were all trying to take more responsibility, more ownership in their life, be more empowered to be able to reach their goals and become the type of people they wanted to be. And I really dug that. I mean, it was so amazing to just be around a group of people who really wanted to build that in themselves. And then through that process, I had the opportunity to work with a few different partners to build the company XOSO, which was essentially like the peak of my career, like my dream really, to build an awareness system, a comprehensive awareness system that could teach people exactly how their thoughts, their emotions, and their body interrelate, to give them more and more tools and more empowerment so they could build the vitality, the health, the lives that they wanted to build. So I was in the midst of essentially building that, pushing to make that a global company. We were in 3 different countries at the time. And that was when, Allison Mack had approached me to invite me into DOS. And at the time, there were a bunch of different struggles going on. I had an ex-boyfriend's father was very sick with cancer. I had another very close friend who had just passed from cancer. And I had another friend that I was also taking care of that was, struggling with a terminal illness. And I was just struggling to have the emotional capacity to keep pushing. You lose someone and you feel like there's a grieving process. How can you kind of keep pushing this global company forward? How can I keep this dream moving forward if I'm the backbone of this company? And, I think between that and really wanting to be a better leader, wanting to be able to be there for the people that I was hoping to, grow this company with, I thought what Allison was offering was exactly what I needed. If I could
In
have,
DOS. What
yeah.
she was offering in DOS. So what if anybody on this call or anybody watching this video has all of their information about DOS and about ESP based on the vow, what what do you think is a misperception or a misapprehension?
Whenever I spoke to anybody about this, it seemed like the primary assumption was that this organization had bad intent. And that's been very hurtful for me to experience. From the beginning, I've always experienced that the people who were part of this organization had very good intent. They really wanted to help us grow, help us reach our goals, and do so in a very caring and compassionate way. We wanted to push hard. This was a Navy SEALs kind of a program, right? I mean, I've been through medical school, I've been through being on call, I've been through not sleeping, I've been through all that stuff, and I've pushed myself maybe from a more forceful, regimented way. But I found this to be a really loving, caring, and compassionate way of pushing people past their fears and to become a better version of themselves. And it's been very sad to see it portrayed in such a negative light where they think people have such bad intentions. It breaks my heart, honestly.
Well, we're going to come back to that also. I'm sure that every one of you is going to say something that I'll want to come back to and that our audience will have questions about. I'm going to go to Linda next, and then I actually don't know how to pronounce your name. Sahajo? Sahajo?
Sahajo.
Sahajo. Okay. So Linda and then Sahajo.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So my name is Linda Chung. I'm 51 years old. I am a former corporate lawyer, music lawyer, and marketer. I've gone to 3 different Ivy League schools, Dartmouth undergrad, Cornell Law School, and Columbia Business School. I have my own business in financial services and have a team of over 10 people on my team. And I joined ESP actually right after I quit my corporate job. I really wanted to, I actually thought business school teaches you how to be an entrepreneur. FYI, it doesn't. And so I learned that I didn't have the skills basically to have my own business. And no real mentors or role models. Everybody I knew was either a lawyer or company person or a doctor or some kind of professional like that. So I really knew that if I wanted to have my own business, I would need to learn how to develop the skills of an entrepreneur, what it would take. And I thought that was really just sales skills primarily. So I wanted help from that. That was a very concrete, measurable thing that I wanted to learn, because I had met a guy who went to Harvard Business School, and he basically similar background. He became very successful very quickly. I'm like, sign me up. And after taking a couple of their trainings, and I had no idea actually what was involved. And even though I was warned that it was potentially a cult, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to keep an open mind and just take it for my own experience.
And you were warned that ESP was
Yes,
potentially
yes,
a cult? Okay.
yes, yes. So I was warned that the person who introduced me to the person who was part of ESP, she said, oh, by the way, he's going to try to enroll you in his cult. And I was like, and I was like, well, how much does it cost? And she said it was like 25,000. I'm like, oh, don't worry, I'm not going to sign up for that if it's 25,000. I made a joke, and I was like, they have cults in New York City? I was just like, I thought the real estate's too expensive for that. Anyway, I was just kind of like, yeah, and I'll just decide for myself. So, and I'm glad I did, because I was very open-minded. I knew specifically what I was going in to look for, and actually it didn't do any of that specific. It did a little bit, but not in the way that I thought. I thought it was going to be sales training. Here, do this. And it was more like, learning by doing, and actually being a better communicator, understanding what people want. And it totally transformed my idea. And really, it was really helped me understand what my limitations were in terms of selling, because I had a lot of baggage with that. I didn't want to be a used car salesman. When I told my parents I wanted to start my own business and, in sales, and they just like looked so down on it. They're like, you went to 3 Ivy League schools and you want to do what? I wanted to start my own food business. And then so I had already taken a lot of trainings and I loved them. I thought they were like way better investment actually than any of my Ivy League degrees, honestly, ESP, the curriculum, because it really helped me learn how to understand my personal emotional limitations, thought limitations, all the things that really this totally served me. Those other schools were good for the job that they were designed for, to help get a job at a law firm, help get a job in a company. But ESP was really for me.
And what do you think is, if somebody watches The Vow and that's what they know about DOS, what do you think is the sort of primary misapprehension?
The biggest apprehension is they think that, I'll be honest, I think it was a sex slave cult designed for Keith Raniere to have sex with a lot of women. And, it was really, the whole intent was, anyone who says that is like, they just can't believe that actually a group of women would want to and sign up for this kind of extreme mentorship. And they think because a man was involved, that's the only reason why a man would be involved in mentoring and helping women, because that's what they would think. So,
Okay, thank you, Linda. And lots of stuff to get back to in that also. Sahajo.
Hi.
Say
Yes.
that right?
Yes,
Okay.
you did. Yeah. So my name's Sahajo Hertel. I have European roots, but I predominantly grew up in multicultural and multilingual communities in India. Thus the name. And I got a bachelor's degree in politics, and I have a master's degree in political philosophy, in which I mainly focused on indoctrination, political identity, humanity, collaboration, things like that. I speak 5 languages, and I've lived, worked, and traveled in 23 countries across 4 continents. And, I've always really been interested in humanity and collaboration, having experienced so many different cultures. I've always wanted to figure out how people could understand each other better based on different belief systems, based on their indoctrination. So, what was important to me was really humanity and bringing people closer together. So I got introduced to ESP in 2008, and I took my first ESP class then. I loved it. I started applying it to my own life, started my own businesses and different things. And then I got very involved in the community and took many different courses. I was there for about 10 years. And I ended up being invited to DOS by one of my closest friends. And I was in it for about 2.5 years. The reason that I joined it was because, well, personal growth had been very important to me. I'd been doing it for a long time. And, you know, I was looking for how to make my life even more amazing. Like, I wanted to push more. I wanted to push on my boundaries, my limiting beliefs. I wanted to become stronger. I wanted to become tougher. Yeah, and that's why I was interested in it. And that's why I joined.
I should have asked each of you how long you were a part of DOS. Michelle, how long were you in DOS?
About 2.5 years as well.
And Danielle?
Probably about just shy of 2 years, or 2 years around.
Danielle, are you the doctor who did the cauterizing?
Yes.
Linda, how long were you in?
About 6 months.
6 months. And how long did you do ESP before joining DOS?
About 4.5 years.
Okay, Leah. Is it
Hi,
Leah or Leah?
Did,
Leah?
did,
Leah. I
Leah.
will respond to Leah as
Pam,
well. Star
did
Wars
you,
fan.
Pam, did you want to ask me the vow question as well?
Oh, yes.
I want
Sorry,
to
I
answer
got
it.
distracted. Sorry, yes. Answer that question. I got distracted by all of a
Absolutely.
sudden I realized I had not asked
That's okay.
about
That's okay.
everybody's
No,
time.
but I really wanted to answer that
Yeah.
question because I think it's a great question. But I
Thank you.
don't, yeah, no, totally. I don't know if people realize the whole vow, all of it, like there's one person in that whole, I don't want to call it documentary, but that whole production that was actually a member of DOS.
Just Sarah.
So yes, so there was 105 members of DOS, and there was one person who told the whole story who was in DOS. So
Well, that's a
I
very
think
good
I
point.
think that's a big difference.
And I'm just going to ask you a question on this instead of waiting for everybody, since that's so relevant. What of the 105 people you said were a part of DOS?
I believe at the peak, that's roughly where we're at. Yeah.
And of the 105, how many left before the whole thing became public? Do you know?
When you say by public, what do you mean? Do you mean
Before DOS became known publicly, you know, when everything was made public, by then I knew some people had left, right? Had left DOS. Do you know how many had left?
I think there was like 2 or 3, maybe, like a few.
And then after the whole thing became public, how many of you have your perspective? Or is it just the 8 of you, or are there more of you who maintain the perspective that it was entirely consensual and not part of a cult?
No, there are many more who share our perspectives and experience, but they're just trying to mitigate the backlash. You know, it hurts people's reputations, their relationships. So hopefully that can change and we can create a space where more people can share their experiences. But right now, there are many people kind of in the background, quietly supporting in the meantime.
Before I go to Leah, I just want to ask Sahajo, is there anything else you want to share about misapprehensions, et cetera? I got so excited about that question that I completely forgot whether you had completed your initial kind of
No, I think that I was done. Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. Thank you.
Great. Leah.
Hi. So my name is Leah Madashaw. I am 34 years old. I guess my background, I have a Master of Science degree. I studied microbiology, specifically antibiotics. And I've now been self-employed for 10 years as a business consultant, which makes a lot of sense because I studied microbiology. But that is, you know, when you look back in your life, that's where it led. And also, I've been married for 8 years. I'm a mom. I live in Vancouver, and have for, gosh, 15 years now, I think. So I joined ESP in 2011. I wanted to do something with my husband that wasn't exactly counseling, but could kind of be sort of relationship fortifying, I guess. And I just have this belief that like we have always had a really good relationship. I mean, that's why I married the guy. But like I always believed it could be even better. And my sister had been taking these classes and they sounded so interesting. And she wouldn't tell me very much about them. So that made me want to do it even more because I wanted to know what it was all about. And so did it, and I was like totally blown away, loved it. So kept doing it. And then in 2017, I was invited to join DOS. So I was involved for about 3 months. And I think the next question is what's my thoughts around the vow and people's misunderstandings. So I think one thing that may be implied is that like all the DOS women were like automatons. We did what we were told, and like our whole lives were somehow wrapped up in DOS. And that just totally wasn't my experience at all. I was doing my life. I was doing my job, doing my relationships, going on vacation with my family. Like I was doing my life, and I had a few extra text messages thrown in and a few extra errands. Like that's what it was. But those like little things, they add up. You know, they add up to making your whole life better. I think Michelle referenced that, like just doing little things to trust yourself more. And so I think like we were doing our lives, we're actually, I don't think we're that interesting as it's been made out to seem.
Thank you. Nicki, you are next.
Hard to follow all of those credentials. I grew up in Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm 38, and in my past life, I was an actor. That's where a lot of people know me from. I was on the sci-fi series Battlestar Galactica, and I loved it. I never quit the show. I know that's a rumor that's out there that people have said. I would never ask to leave such an amazing show. Spoiler alert, they killed my character. That's how it goes in Hollywood. So around, I think it was during the second season or so, I was friends kind of on a, you know, casual basis with Sarah Edmondson, who, if you've seen The Vow, you know who that is. And she told me about this amazing personal growth program that she just got back from in Albany. She had met Mark Vicente, who's also in The Vow, at a film festival, and she is an incredible salesperson. I will say that about her. And I was moved not just because she sold this program to me, but because of how she was. You know, I had experienced her a certain way before that, and we had a very superficial friendship. And then we went for dinner and she started asking me deeper questions about why I felt and thought the way I did. And it was compelling to me because I was studying, as well as acting, you know, I was studying religion, philosophy, psychology. And since I was pretty young, like I read Man's Search for Meaning when I was 15, and I was like, I know we can choose our experience, but I don't know how. Like if someone in a concentration camp can be joyful and find meaning, then surely I can. But I'm a comfortable Canadian. Like how do I create that life for myself? And I think I had the experience that I'm sure a lot of people do, where I hit a certain level of success. I was on a show, I had an apartment, a relationship, you know, all the things, but I didn't feel fulfilled. And I had ideas and things that I wanted to do that I didn't know how to actualize. So when Sarah presented me with this program, I'd never done therapy before. You know, I really wasn't a joiner. I was very much about doing my own thing, and maybe still am. My friends who know me probably like that's still much more my way of being, but it was compelling. And if it was true what she was saying, I felt like it could help me both in my goals as well as my relationships. So I went to Albany in 2005 and took a training, and I was very moved by the curriculum. It was something that didn't require you to believe in anything that you couldn't see or understand. It was based in logic, and the tools are very practical, and at the same time gave you a really deep look into your own emotional kind of your belief system, and how your emotions relate to your beliefs, which they do. So I really loved the curriculum. I ended up going back and taking another training the following summer, and kind of deciding like, okay, I was living in Hollywood at the time and thinking, okay, I can do this and get on another show or try to be a movie star, or I can figure out who I am and why I'm here. And I also had other goals besides acting, but I just felt a lot more comfortable in that realm. So I decided to challenge myself to develop more my sense of self, because I realized no matter how many people love you, no matter how famous you are, if you don't feel good within yourself, then none of that really matters. And I found the tools really effective in helping you do that. So I ended up moving to Albany. I started a couple different companies. I, became a coach, taught classes, and in 2015, along with a few of my closest friends and with Keith's mentorship, we started DOS. So I think from when it started, it was 3 years to when it went public, and the rest is history.
Nicki, you started it with Allison and Keith. It was the three of you, or also?
No, there were several other. There were 7 of us.
So
seven women.
You and Allison, and I forget her name, the daughter of Nancy Saltzman, right?
Lauren actually joined later.
Oh, okay.
But she did join the first line because of her relationships with us and with Keith and things like that. But she actually wasn't there at the very beginning.
Okay.
She was only there for, you want to say how long, Nicki?
So she joined, in January. So like 5 months, 5 or 6 months.
She joined 5 or 6 months before the whole thing went public.
Yeah.
Which means that Sarah joined just shortly after that.
Yeah, she invited Sarah right away.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I know we've talked about this before, but just one sort of major thing that you think is a misapprehension based on what people have read or have seen in the vow or read in newspaper articles, etc. And then I'll ask Angelica.
Sure. So I think the biggest misconception about what's out there, or say the vow or seduce, is that they're documentaries in the traditional sense, where they are a filmmaker going with a camera and being a fly on a wall. This is a carefully constructive narrative, and as we've said, there are a very small number of people who have concocted it, crafted it, controlled it this whole time. And because of the way the media cycle works, and then when the government got involved, which we can speak about, it gave no space for any other voices. This is the first time all of us have come together for a live interview. We've been making our own videos out of, I think, just our own necessity to start to speak about our experiences, because what we've seen unfold on the screen and in newspapers and things is just really taking everything out of context, spinning it a certain way, and stripping grown women, especially, of their agency in a way that I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think I can, that we think is very damaging. So that's why we feel kind of very strongly compelled, despite the hate we get, despite people thinking that we're supporting a sex trafficker, which of course we never would. We think it's important to talk.
Okay, we're going to come back to a lot of that too. Um, Thank you. Angelica.
Yes, hi. So my name is Angelica Hinojos. I'm going to say it in Spanish because that's my native language. And
Thank you. And
um,
I will try. Can I try?
of course,
Like I don't speak Spanish, but say Angelica.
Angelica Hinojos.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm a trained psychologist. I have my master's degree in organizational psychology in the UK, and I worked for multinational companies in the human resources for around 10 years, and I worked for headhunters, you know, placing top executives in Fortune 500 companies. That was my life back then, and then I, in matters of family, which is why I'm, focusing the most at the moment. I've been married for 15 years. It's going to be this October, and we're raising two boys, a 6 and an 8-year-old. And I was actually introduced to ESP by my husband, and like same as Leah, we've always had this very big, like same value in personal growth, and we have been doing couples therapy for like a year, and then we found this. Well, actually, he found this, and he introduced me to it, and I went very, very skeptically actually to the first ones. No, like being a psychologist and having been to therapy for many, many years, I was very, very skeptical, and I actually found it very interesting even the first day. And yeah, right after I finished my 5-day, I remember I called a friend of mine who's a psychologist as well, and I said, I think this is the psychology of the 21st century. Like, I think what we were looking for, which is in psychology, we couldn't find anything that was measurable and reproducible. I was able to find it there, so I found that very, very appealing, in my career. And for DOS, I was actually introduced by a dear friend of mine. I met her through ESP. We were both coaches in ESP, and I think we probably were friends for around 5 years before she invited me. And I really admired her way of life. And when she invited me, she's a very, very loving, caring woman. And yeah, when she invited me, I considered it, but everything seemed very right up my alley because I wanted to grow in a loving way. So yeah, I said yes to DOS. And the misconception, I know you're gonna probably ask that one. For me, I think one of the biggest things is that when you watch The Vow, it almost seems like people didn't have a choice. Like, it seems that we were, forced to be there or manipulated to be there. And it wasn't my experience at all. Like, it was actually a very freeing way of being. It was a commitment. Like, I did make a commitment when I took the vow, actually, but that was a very different thing. That was my choice. So it's interesting to see how people think that we didn't have a choice when it wasn't my experience at all.
So let's start there. That's an interesting place to start, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. But what I've heard from people who have watched The Vow is not that people thought you didn't have a choice as far as choosing to join, but that the involvement of collateral, it sort of negates a layer of consent in a way that if you can consent to the starting point, right? You can consent to give the collateral, and you can consent to do whatever you need to do in order for the collateral to not be used against you. But once that step has been taken, you're really no longer free. If you think the collateral is going to be used, then now you're in a situation in which, in a way, you're coerced because of fear of collateral being released. So anybody can, talk about that.
I
I'll
can
take
speak.
that one.
Okay.
I'll take
We
that
were talking about this one, so go for it.
Well, and you can add on to it. First off, the whole premise of it, this was an agreement, okay?
Linda, can you put your microphone up a
This
little?
was an agreement. So the only conditions of, first of all, the collateral is something that you chose of your own design. And the only situations that the collateral would be released upon is one, if you broke the secrecy commitment, and two, you broke the vow, meaning the commitment to DOS. Anything else, the collateral is not to be released. And I specifically asked this too, because if I failed on some task or something like that, inadvertently or anything like that, would the collateral be released? No, both those things are completely 100% in my control.
Mhm.
No coercion.
So just tell everybody, what exactly was the vow that you all took? Like, what was that, the vow?
I'm happy to answer that. The vow is just, it was a very individualized statement that each person who joined made for themselves. So it was the person saying what was important in their lives, what they wanted to do, what they were willing to do for it. So I think each person had their own individual vow that they took to themselves and their growth.
I didn't know that. I'm not sure that was something that was clear, especially with the title of the documentary being The Vow, and not vows. I assumed that there was one vow that you all made, but that's not the case.
And it was just a lifetime vow. That's it.
And so if this is the last question that I'm going to ask right now, and then I'll open it and then maybe do some follow up. But what was your understanding of what that vow was, and what would have it looked like to break that vow for yourself? I mean, what was your own individual vow, and what would have breaking it been?
I can answer that. I mean, for me, it was very, very simple and very, very clear. The first vow that I took was not to disclose that this organization existed. So if I broke my word and I shared that it existed, that would be breaking my word to myself. So that was my first one. And then it was my lifetime commitment to the relationship between myself and my master. So, however that's going to unfold, similarly, like, I guess, ideally in a marriage, when you commit to somebody, it might get messy, it might get hard, there might be challenges, but we're both committed to this for life so that we can figure it out. And if I left that commitment, that would be, for me, breaking my word and breaking my vow.
Anybody else want to take that question too?
Yeah, I can say that something along the same lines, like those two vows, the first two that Danielle said, those are the kind of like the same thing. It was the secrecy that the organization existed, and then a lifetime commitment to my master. And the vow that I made was like, I wanted to be the best version of myself that I could possibly be, and I knew that my master was there to help me achieve that. So if I, like, when you ask, what would it have meant for you to break your vow? It would have meant for me to just break the vow with myself, like what I wanted the most. I decided to, not go for it. Because again, as Danielle says, being married for 15 years, I'm sure, I don't know, like those of you who are mothers and like it gets tough, it gets rough. But having a solidness that this is what I wanted to have, that would have meant really something really hurtful for me, for my word.
So it makes me think of, as a social scientist, a question, a sort of metrics question. Were there women in every, I don't know what it's called, like, I guess you had a top line and then you had other lines, but what is the vertical called? What you were
It's
noting?
funny, there a lot
know
of the
that there was a name
language
for
has
it.
been created after the fact because we very much interacted with our
Just your master and your
circle.
slave.
Yeah, your master and your slave, and then your circle. I would say maybe lineage,
Lineage.
or like
Okay.
the
All right. So
the
the question that I have is, was it the case that there were certain people in the role of master who the people who were their slaves had a different experience and maybe a more negative experience based on how that master related to them as slaves than other ones? Or was it just the personal experience of the person in the role of slave that resulted in whether they felt unsatisfied with it? Was there any were there any measurable things that you could say, oh, well, okay, so this person's whole, like everybody under this person, or the people immediately under this person had a negative experience, but pretty much everybody under this person had a positive experience?
if only. That would be the simplest explanation, right? I think, I don't know, Michelle, do you want to speak to that? Because I don't think that's accurate.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that a little bit. Like, I think that, there was nothing cozy about DOS. That wasn't the point. I think everyone's talked about, I wanted more growth. I wanted to push myself. That's what it was. It's not easy, I think, to wake up every day. It wasn't for me to be like, okay, how can I face my greatest fears today? What can I overcome? So the intent was growth. And I think that's just, everyone handles that very differently. I think Danielle and I obviously have a very different experience there were 4 of us who were invited to DOS by Allison Mack, India Oxenberg, and a woman named Nicole who testified against Keith at his trial. The fact that Danielle and I have one experience and say one thing, and India and Nicole are saying another, I think is evidence that there's no universal experience. I think it's really important to go back to the fact that what the intent was. It was to help people. And I think what's often a misconception is that masters were like running after their slaves, telling them what to do left and right. Like, I was a master and a grandmaster. I know what I was inviting people into, and I was committing as much to them. I think probably more. You're really pouring into someone. I thought about these people daily, like, how can I grow myself more to be a better example for them, so I can be in a better position to help them grow and achieve their goals.
So all of you had an overwhelmingly positive experience. I'm sure that there were negative moments, but you have framed them for yourself in a way where your overarching experience of it was positive, consensual, and not coerced. Obviously, there are people who felt differently about that. I'm going to just open this now to questions, and so anybody who wants to participate in the Q&A and doesn't mind having their face on the video, then go ahead and put on your camera. And oh, Jeff has a question. I know Ellen has a question. Jeff, I'll go to you first, and then Ellen. Oh, unmute yourself, Jeff. You're muted. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Quite a lovely setting you're in.
I know it's a virtual setting of the university I teach at.
Oh, nice.
But thank you.
For a second.
It's better than the back of my living room wall. So first of all, thank you, Pamela, and thank you for all the participants. It's been absolutely fascinating listening to your experiences. I guess my one question I have, the main question is, I feel like I've sort of been put right in the middle of a conversation here, and I'm trying to get the bird's eye view of 30,000 feet. If there is one, I don't know if there's a particular, I heard one of you say this is the first time you've all presented together. And so, but as I was listening, I thought that there was a kind of shared maybe message in you coming together, and maybe that's wrong. I'm interested in that. And I was trying to figure out what the message would be, or some of the things that I heard. And and then some of the things I'm wondering if they're also what you think, but just weren't expressed, which is, so one kind of narrative could be like, there is a tremendous amount of value in this experience, a great sense of fulfillment, even enlightenment, a powerful sense of agency and growth and so forth. And at the same time, we recognize that this moved in a direction that shared a lot of the things you're talking about do share the characteristics of cults, of charismatic leader, highly educated, highly intellectual individuals who are pursuing a particular type of growth to try to find a sense of fulfillment in a post-industrial, late capitalist, consumerist society. And that it, for at least some members, this did move in an extremely destructive direction. And I haven't heard that, and so I just want to make sure, because otherwise it comes across as almost kind of rehabilitation of the group. And I mean, maybe that's part of what the agenda is, but I just really didn't know, and I was wondering if someone could express that. And then the only other thing is that I know that a lot of you are saying it's not a cult, but actually, if you look at the literature, the sociology of cults, individuals who are in cults, they feel a profound sense of agency. They feel an incredible sense of fulfillment. And they often get great value in them, a sense of being bonded to the other members, a sense of separateness, but a separateness that's sort of a kind of special separateness, like they're gaining access, to some real practices, habits of daily life that are actually very powerful for them. So I don't know that the experience of feeling agency and growing from it actually is inconsistent with the idea that there were cult-like characteristics of this organization. Now, again, I'm coming in blind, so if I'm completely wrong about any of this, please just correct me. It's not meant like in any critical way, just purely curiosity.
Absolutely. And I think just to zoom out, our most important message at this point, at least I'll just speak for myself. I have witnessed people that I love be wrongfully prosecuted, and some imprisoned, some are still on house arrest awaiting sentencing. I have had a deep, intense education into the criminal justice system, and it is not, I don't know what your backgrounds on here are in that. It is not what we think. There is no justice, at least in the federal system. And this isn't just from my own experience now. I actually speak to people in prison across the country. I've taken this on as a cause that's meaningful to me, because I realized what happened to us is something that happens to people every single day who are taken advantage of by a system that capitalizes off of a culture of winning as opposed to truth and justice. So the narrative is one thing, which of course we'd like to correct. We'd like to clear our names. We'd like to clear our friends' names, the community that actually was very good and did positive things. But more importantly, people are in prison right now who should not be. And that is something that we would like to bring attention to. The problem is there's been so much moral panic and kind of hysteria around words like cult, or the fact that women were branded. No, grown women chose to get a brand. It's a very different thing, but the publicists behind the narrative knew that a story like that would gain so much attention and bring up such a feeling of disgust and rejection and judgment in people that they would stop questioning critically and stop investigating really what happened. So our goal is to inspire a different kind of conversation. You can call it what you want. You can call it a cult. Keith, sure, he's charismatic, but I mean, we were there, we lived it, we benefited tremendously. We have no reason beyond our own conscience at this point to speak out. It doesn't exist anymore. But I know I have witnessed something I feel is wrongful, and I feel strongly about standing up against that. And there are people who are misrepresenting the truth completely to their own benefit, and I don't agree with that. So I hope that answers your question.
Can I just add something
Yeah.
to that as well? You know, just with the whole thing as well, like we all participated in it, but nothing occurred that was either criminal, that was dangerous, that was, you know, seedy
No
or
violence.
weird or strange or violent or abusive. And the way that it's been portrayed by a very small number of women is basically why we're here, because we have a very different perception, and we know what it was. We were there, we have firsthand experience, and the way that it's been portrayed till now is just not what it was. So
I want to ask questions about the legal aspects of it, and the people who have been convicted of crimes and what those crimes were, et cetera. But I know that people have other questions, so I'm going to first ask Ellen for her question, and then Trisha, and then there's someone who there are a couple of people in the chat that I'll read their questions in a minute. So Ellen, go ahead.
Terrific. Thanks. First of all, Pamela, thanks. And to all of you from DOS, I think it's very courageous and kind for you to share your time and thoughts with us, because you know, because you have a perspective and share it. So thank you. I appreciate it. My only knowledge of any of this comes from the book and the series. So it comes from a specific place. So I want to sort of say, well, my question or my perspective, you know, might be one-sided because the information I had going into the call. I want to make sure it doesn't sound aggressive because I don't know how to say it generically, but please excuse that going in. There were sort of two questions I had. One was, one of you, I think it was Michelle, you know, mentioned, or maybe it was Danielle, I'm sorry, I forget, but mentioned sort of that the vow, if you broke it, collateral would be shared if you broke it. And one of the things that crossed my mind for life, that it was a lifetime commitment to your master to keep that vow and that relationship. And what crossed my mind at that moment when you said that, as someone who's divorced and made a lifetime commitment on my ketubah to my ex-husband that didn't work, was things change and people change, and age changes and life experiences change. And clearly everybody, especially those of us who seek to better ourselves and self-awareness, even that and how it looks can change. So I want to ask both questions, but one question I have is, as a theoretical idea, how do you account for sort of a lifetime commitment you're making such that the collateral could get out if, you know, 1 year, 5 years, 6 years down the road, just like, you know, my commitment to my ex-husband and his to me, like, oh crap, you know, we didn't keep it, it failed, one or both of us failed. And so what's the perspective on, but then there's the weight of collateral getting out, and do you stay in because, oh shit, that was some serious collateral? So that's one question. And the second question, you know, it sounds like you all sound incredibly educated and successful in every, you know, in many things you've done in a great, huge way. And it also sounds like as masters, you were coming in with all the right goals and intent and values to support your, I don't know if you called them slaves, but slaves. But what was the check and the balance? Because there were, whatever you said, 130 of you. And if 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 weren't you, wasn't that putting, I'm saying that negatively, I'm sorry, but couldn't that have been putting a lot of the slaves or people 1 or 2 or 5 rungs down the ladder, you know, just in a really bad space? What was the quality control to make sure that didn't happen? Those are my questions.
Do you mind if I just quickly answer that one, and then
Yeah, please.
maybe someone else, because I was part of, you know, the first line, we met several times a week to discuss protocols, how to make it reproducible, and how to avoid exactly what I think you're alluding to, which is either someone just not having the capacity to perhaps be a master, or someone abusing that role. And so there were several things. There were screening processes in place, as well as an ethics board being set up, and a way that someone who is in the role of a slave, which you know, the intention was that people would be both a master and a slave, because it's like, you know, you're a better leader if you can be a follower, and vice versa. So we were working on all of those things is perhaps the shortest answer. This was new. It was something we were developing. There were things we tried that didn't work, that we changed. And we were very open to feedback, to failure, to you know, to the different insights as we went along.
Nicki, what were some of those things that you started out with and then you discarded because they weren't working?
Gosh, I'll be honest, a lot of it is a blur at that time. I will say, for example, even the name master slave was something we thought about changing. We also thought about changing the name DOS. Like, things were in constant review. I think definitely one of the things that didn't work, or that we were systematizing better, was the enrollment process, just to make sure that like really people understood, because there was someone earlier on who decided they didn't want to do it anymore. And it was heartbreaking for us, because, and especially for the person who invited them, because of what it would mean for that woman to have made the commitment and then backed out. Not because, you know, like, no one wants to take someone on in such a serious commitment who doesn't want to. So, you know, we really reflected on, okay, making sure, yeah, we were all excited and enthusiastic, but how do we make sure that people really understand the commitment? And obviously, in hindsight, you know, we could have, should have done more in that realm, but the truth is we were developing it. We were developing something new. And then your first question was about what if things change?
Yeah, like getting a divorce, you know, like there, even when you make a lifetime commitment to somebody, we do have mechanisms by which, in a, you know, with as little punitive penalties as possible, hopefully people can separate themselves from commitments they thought were going to be lifetime commitments. So what about the fact that there wasn't, you and I've talked about this, Nicki, I made exactly the same point. You know, what about the fact that there wasn't any sort of escape valve?
I think I can try that. I mean, I think essentially there was, because there was still choice, meaning people could still leave, and they still did leave, even though they made that lifetime commitment. And, you know, in divorce, with marriage, we make the commitment and there is an out. And part of what we were trying to build, I think, in DOS was for us to not have an out in our personal growth, meaning in our commitment to ourselves. So I know for myself personally, I've had, you know, New Year's resolutions on my, you know, health goals, on running, on a whole bunch of things my whole life. Like, I think I started when I was 15. And I keep on just putting them off. I keep on saying tomorrow. I keep on being lazy, or finding a whole bunch of reasons why to not do it, make other things more important. And so this lifetime commitment, or making this commitment, was about not giving yourself that out, basically, and doing it with not just anyone. I mean, I think, you know, for anyone to make this kind of a commitment, you would want to trust the person, you would want to know the person, hopefully. I mean, I know when I was invited, you know, I did take it very seriously. And this wasn't a lifetime commitment to the person per se. It was to myself and to this friendship, and her being a mentor for my whole life, and her not giving up on me. So when I gave up and I said, no, I can't do this anymore, I don't want to do my personal growth anymore, I don't want to do my health anymore, she wouldn't like let me, and she wouldn't abandon me. And she would say, you know, she would say, come on, Sahajo, remember what you wanted to do, remember what's important to you, let's do this.
So what, but why
Yeah.
was collateral required for that? I mean, I assume
Well,
she didn't, I assume she didn't say at the time, come on, you have to do this or I'm gonna release your collateral.
Well, I mean, that's the common misconception. The collateral had nothing to do with what we were doing on an ongoing basis. The collateral was just to secure the secrecy and for us not to give up on pushing on our boundaries. That's it. So beyond that, everything else was in your control. And if you didn't do the things that your master told you, which women didn't do what they were told all the time. Women didn't do what they committed to all the time. Collateral was never threatened against anyone.
Right,
You know,
so,
we did
I
maybe
mean, I
close
understand
showers,
that.
we
So
did
then
different
why is
things.
it
So
necessary is the question. Why? Because that's the, I think to me, that's the piece that gets this in trouble. You know, that makes all the one thing that makes all of this seem less voluntary is that's just the one piece, you know?
I'll, do you mind if I jump in? I
Sure.
just, I think it does go back to choice because everyone had a choice to give collateral, you know? So, I mean, there are plenty of people who didn't. There were people that I invited. I told them, you know, this is what's required. This is what I would need from you in order to even tell you about this cool thing I want to tell you about. Some people said yes. Actually, everyone that gave that first collateral to me that just wanted to hear about it ended up joining. But if someone didn't, I mean, you have that choice. If you don't want to do that, you just say no. So all those things are in your control. And I think it's just important for people to realize it's not a trap. You know, like this, you know, this offer is for you. It's for the person that this invitation is going to. I even had my, you know, Allison at one point in our process asked me if I wanted to do this anymore because, you know, you sometimes fall back into your patterns, and she was like, you don't seem like you really want to grow anymore. You don't have to do this. Nobody wants you, you know, you don't want to take
Yeah.
on someone that doesn't want this anymore. It's a conversation because at the end of the day, it's about that person that you've taken on. If this is not the thing for them, then no one's going to stop that. But it is important. It's an important conversation and process to go through, I think.
Yeah, so there's a question that I got in the chat that this is a perfect segue to, and then I'm going to have Trisha ask her question, which is, have you talked to the women who feel differently, who left and, you know, either left beforehand or have a different view about what DOS really was, who have a view more like Sarah, for example? Have you talked to them to find out what their perspective is, and regardless of whether you've actually talked to them one-on-one, I know you've heard what Sarah's perspective is, maybe what some of the other people's perspective is. And so why do you think that their decision was the bad one and yours was the right one?
Well, I don't think that we're framing it as the right or the wrong one. I think what we've noticed is that stories have changed over time. You know, someone like, I didn't know Sarah super well, but I knew India very well and saw her, you know, in one way, and then saw her change her perspective of things, you know, after having her mother in the media saying that she's, you know, she needs to be saved, that she's being trapped, that, you know, all these things. And we're looking at each other. I'm like, you good? She's like, I'm good. You know, so those things give us pause. And I think that for people to think that, you know, the story of, for example, India and Sarah, the representation in full of the entire organization of DOS, I think should be looked at. You know, I think there's obviously diverse perspectives, but I think what we've experienced is that people don't want to hear what we have to say. You know, and I think even for an event like this, you know, advertising to watch The Vow to get ready for what we have to say does, you know, instead of go to our website, watch our videos, you know, I think is very indicative of how strong this story is. You know, I don't think any of us would be here if we didn't see this story unfold, this fiction of what DOS was unfold before our eyes. You know, there's no incentive materially, especially for us to be here, except I can sleep at night. You know, like I think we all had experiences of people saying, just say you're a victim, just say it was this. People, no one would fault us for that. We would actually be handsomely rewarded, but it ain't about that for us.
I just want to make one other point too, Pamela. Michelle, nice. You know, the other thing that we saw the story change also when specific things happened. You know, I don't think a lot of people understand how much pressure there was. You know, both legal pressure, you know, media pressure, and you know, like you said, Michelle, you saw Indy in a certain way. I was there. You know, we were there with her as friends for a year after this went public. But there were crazy pressures that she was under legally. There were very big consequences she would be facing if she didn't start to change her perception into that of a victim.
What do you mean? What do you mean? She was never arrested, right? She didn't have.
Well, she was co-conspirator number 1 or 2, co-conspirator number 2. So she was facing serious crimes. That is not that much different than Allison.
So there was high pressures to change those stories, and it was unfortunate to watch our friends go through that, you know, to see them in those situations and then watch their perception change from one to another. I don't think most people know that.
Also, you know, the people who are expressing their dissatisfaction with things that they experienced, these were our friends. You know, Sarah brought me into ESP. We'd known each other for a long time. She didn't come to me when this happened. You know, the people who are now saying these things, who are now, you know, they've done books, they've done documentaries, they're signing up to get restitution, they're waging a civil case, which now makes it difficult to speak to them more candidly. They didn't come and talk to their friends about what they were experiencing, not just to share their grievances, which would have been, like I said, completely welcome. If someone was unhappy in DOS, we had so much empathy and time, and you know, there were conversations that happened all the time about, like, you know, how people were doing and what they wanted, and if they weren't happy and why. And so that they chose to go first to the media, then to the government and threaten their friends. I mean, I you know, thought I was going to be federally indicted. Like, that's not what a friend does, in my opinion. So that's something I think a lot of people don't consider. And I do want to say something. I don't want this to become, that isn't true, we heard it on the vow. Hilarious.
Well, so I'm gonna go right to Trisha and then Jeff, and then there's a question about the branding that on this chat that I think is worth asking, but I'm gonna have Trisha go first. Trisha, unmute. There you go.
Hi there. Okay, so first of all, I apologize. I didn't watch the vow. I didn't read the notes, I guess, thoroughly. So I hope my question hasn't already been answered if I'd watched it. So it sounds like what the salacious side of this is the master slave stuff. And you know, I'm familiar with BDSM relationships and this master slave dynamic, and the purpose of that is, you know, it's somewhat sexual, but it's also viewed by a lot of people as a mentoring relationship, and you know, bringing somebody along, and it's for both parties' betterment, and it's not belittling or anything like that. And the trust that goes with that, and the commitment, I see it's very similar. So I just wonder, like, why was this same kind of dynamic used? What was the purpose of it? And just want to say that I hadn't followed the story of all of this when it was in the news, but I do watch a soap opera, and the storyline apparently, and I didn't realize at the time, but the storyline did portray that, and especially about the committing something personal, potentially damaging, and being under that threat. And that was in the storyline too. So just kind of funny.
Soap opera, Trisha? What soap opera is that?
I was General Hospital. I think it was
Oh
about
my
a year
God.
ago, probably when it was in the news. So yeah.
Our
that was like a cult
reputation
movie.
precedes us. That's
Oh,
all I can
wow.
say.
You know, but it was a bad guy, of course, and he was, blackmailing people. So,
Right,
so anyway,
right.
that's that.
Thank you.
So why that dynamic?
Does anybody want to?
Yeah, I'll just start, Trisha. Yeah, I would say, one thing to keep in mind is that there was a very intentional enrollment process. And so one of the things that women were informed of before they joined was that this would be a master slave dynamic that had nothing to do with the BDSM. I don't even really know what that is. I'm not into that. I don't even know where the terminology came from. Maybe Nicki can speak to that more, but I think really the thing to remember is that women were told that that's what that terminology would be, that's how that relationship would be structured. And I know for me personally, there were conversations about that because I was like, what does that mean? And it's very different, I would say, from like, it has nothing to do with the BDSM master slave stuff. So put that over there. It is also not anything related with like servitude or like, the institution of slavery in any way. But I think a lot of it was, you kind of learn through the process. I know that I had a lot of conversations with the person that invited me, and I had a lot of conversations with the people that I invited. But I think just knowing that people were aware that that's what the relationship was going to be, because we can get into all the whys and stuff, but our point really isn't to try to get people to like what we were doing. I think just knowing that people signed up for that knowingly.
I actually want to speak though to what I think Trisha was referring to, because I haven't personally experienced a BDSM lifestyle, but I did research it. So like when we were forming this and looking at different modalities, and that ranged from certain types of yoga, like bhakti yoga, to I did look at ways that BDSM relationships were used in a master slave way to gain a sense of personal freedom through surrender. So I think in that sense, there actually is a similarity if you take out the sex, but there is a surrendering and a building of intimacy, which I think is needed amongst women, building more trust with each other. I think that's something that I didn't grow up with women, is really having that trusting, vulnerable relationship where you could share anything and be yourself completely. And there is a certain sense of surrender to that relationship with someone that you trust will hold the space for you. So in the theory that I understand in the master slave dynamic, I think there could be similarities, although we didn't in any way like base it on that. I would compare it more to like having, and I don't like this word because again, I think it's been associated with cults and things like that, but like having a guru or a master in that sense, where they teach you, or it's like Mr. Miyagi, you know what I mean? It's like they help you and train you in ways that help you get closer to your goals and the person you want to be.
So it sounds like, just really quickly, it sounds like to me, the commitment you made in divulging, turning over some kind of potentially damaging information to your master, it sounds like that was representative of a commitment to you, and in your mind it's a commitment, but what I'm hearing is that it wouldn't actually have been used against you. Is that accurate? Okay, got it.
Yeah, but the point of collateral, it seems to me, is that you would have to assume it would be used, or what's the point of having it? So, I mean, this is the part I think is very confusing, but also we have other questions that I want to get to. And one of them is that, you've talked about I can't remember who at the beginning sort of said, one of the biggest misconceptions was that this was like a sex group, right? But there was sex involved with some of the members of the group and Keith. And I don't know how many, but I mean, there was some. And so somebody is asking a question about what kind of sex was requested or expected, and did the participants know of the others who were also involved in having sex with Keith?
First of all, I just want to comment on the fact that, you know, people's personal sex lives have become fodder for public discourse. Now I understand due to the narrative that exists why that is, but I don't think it's right. I don't think anyone is entitled to know what I do in the bedroom or what anyone does in the bedroom, as long as it's adults and it's consensual. And I do believe that that is what it was. So the only sex in this so-called sex cult is Keith had a personal sex life where he had multiple partners who knew about each other, who knew, you know, what they were involving themselves with. And he had those relationships for 10 to 15 years before DOS was ever conceived. So sex was not part of DOS. I don't agree with making sex bad if people wanted to have, like, I feel like it's gotten very kind of taken out of context. But so Keith did have sexual relationships with some of the first line women from way back, and not all of them.
Was India in the first line?
No.
So
I don't want to talk about people's, there's discrepancies in the stories, and I think people can watch the interviews and see for themselves how the stories have changed over time. And I urge anyone to like read the transcripts and things like that. But again, no one was there except the people involved. And yeah, I think that should.
Well, and I think it's that the point, that wasn't the point of DOS. I think what's out there is that this whole thing was designed for Keith to have sex with women when, like Nicki just said, he already had that. You know, like this would be a very weird way to do that, I think.
Well, let's imagine let's stipulate that it wasn't, for the purposes of this conversation, let's stipulate anyway that the creation of DOS was not for the purpose of providing women to have sex with Keith. But there was an aspect of sex for, I mean, my recollection is that there was some almost like therapeutic kind of, I mean, with India's story, and I think somebody else, I can't remember now because it was a while since I read stuff about it, but that there was like a coaching relationship. And as somebody is in the chat is asking, you know, was there a conflict of interest for Keith being in the role of coach to be having sex with the people he was coaching? So I think that's where the question about, is this just consensual, or is there a dual relationship where there are boundaries crossed?
But there's a distinction between ESP, which was a coaching program, and Keith as a person who had relationships. And Keith was not a coach in ESP. You know, that company was he formed it with Nancy almost 20 years ago, but he wasn't there coaching.
I'm going to let Jeff ask the next question.
I'm back. So I'm gonna be kind of blunt here. It does feel like one is speaking with true believers who have gone through an experience that for them has been very valuable, but who are unable to see the negative. And I'm partly reminded of what I tell my students. Even if they're doing a book review and it's a really great book, you don't give it an A unless they find something negative about it. You know, you just kind of show your objectivity by that. And I hear no negativity here. And I wonder, and that just leaves me wondering if your perspective is of individuals who are still inside of it. That's my first point. The second point is, people have been severely hurt by cults, and they've witnessed loved ones be severely hurt by cults. And they acquire sensitivity to the signs of cults. and again, I don't want to repeat myself, but I will in this sense, a number of the characteristics that you've described are the signs of a cult. Even the thing of what I think Michelle said of that language of, you don't have to do this. Are you really committed? Is quintessential cult-like behavior, because it's putting it on the person. It's their agency, but it's also holding out something special if they stay with it. The secretiveness of the group, classic cult characteristic. The sense of separateness from the society, here marked not just by physical, but also linguistic distinction. The language and the using of language that is frowned upon broadly by society is itself cult, because it bond internally. You get the negative assessment from outside, and that further binds the members of the group to one another, because it creates an us-them mentality, which itself is another sign of a cult. So I get, and there's other aspects of cults that I have not heard here yet, but I'd be interested in finding out more. Zealous commitment to a leader and to a belief system. Questioning and doubt are discouraged. The leader's not accountable. Leadership dictates elements of how one should think or behave and so forth. And it doesn't mean dictate like you have no agency, but there is a kind of shaping of behavior by means of various practices and rituals and so forth. The collateral, it's not about being humiliated. It symbolizes one's commitment to the group. That's what it's about, right? I'm willing to give something that potentially could lead to my complete humiliation. And that's my investment, right? Because that's what we do, right? When we invest heavily in something, a business or something, we're not just going to walk away from it, right? Because we've already got sunk costs. So again, I mean, all of this points in a very certain direction. And I don't, so with me personally, you lose credibility when you do not address the negative experiences of others. In any organization, I mean, I work at a university, right? We don't have special, well, we do have like the whole Thomas Jefferson thing, right? But we don't have special languages or rituals and so forth. But you know, there's things I don't like about my university, the things that they mess up and they do wrong, right? So to not hear any criticism whatsoever is a huge sign that we're speaking to true believers. One last characteristic is, so I'm a student of communist societies of the Soviet Union, right? So what I teach is like, look, communism had a lot of great things. It eliminated illiteracy. In the Soviet Union, right? It led to upward mobility for many women. You know, a sort of a solid medical care system, a fantastic world-class education system. I mean, the list goes on. And at the same time, right, we have other characteristics as well. So
what did you have a question? Did you have a question, or did you want to just?
I'd like to hear you
telling us about ourselves.
I'd like you to address this, because I think that these are the issues that you're going to confront when you go out there, and so why not address them?
So what's useful here, what's interesting, is that we've got two sort of cultural systems, right? Jeff coming from a professorial perspective, right? So, but I'm going to just translate a little bit, because I actually see what the thread is here that I think is really useful for all of you in communicating what you want to communicate. And that is, I sort of have the same sense that Jeff has when I hear no criticism. And so, but Nicki was starting by saying, yeah, we did things wrong and we were, you know, revising things. And that makes me feel better about what you say about the positives. So what I'd love to do is just give you the opportunity to talk about what your understanding of some of the negatives of either DOS or the overarching organization, or the negative experiences that other people had that aren't all about lies or self-serving, you know, other people lying or being self-serving, but, you know, can we agree that some people did actually have negative experiences?
Of course. Of course. I just want to say one thing. Sorry.
I'll clarify after you go.
And by the way, I want to interrupt for a moment to say, I'm really, I really appreciate that you're willing to have the conversation with like tough questions like that, because
of course,
those are the things that people think, and I wanted you to be able to address those things.
Certainly. Yeah, and I don't think we're not here to sell ESP, to sell NXIVM. We're not here to invite anyone into DOS. It doesn't exist anymore. Okay. We are here to counter a narrative that has utterly destroyed our lives and put our loved ones in prison. So forgive us for not talking about their flaws. You know, it feels, I get the criticism and I accept it, and everyone is entitled to their opinion. If you want to think we're brainwashed, that's fine. You know, we're not. I think we're very,
Or maybe we are and we don't know.
yeah, or maybe everyone else.
How can we prove a negative? You know, it's like, how can
exactly.
you? So, and why does it matter? You know,
and exactly, we have a perspective, we have an experience. It has been completely invalidated by the narrative that's out there. And so much damage has been done to our lives that no one cares about, because someone felt that they were lied to and they got a brand and they later regretted it. I just don't think the damage is commensurate to the hate and the prejudice and putting people in prison that we have undergone. And I'm not here to say, you know, feel bad for us. I'm here to present something that could happen to anyone. False accusations, you know, corruption within the government. We've seen narratives play out. I mean, even with the Wuhan virus, like, we're seeing things that we didn't see before, and people made decisions and people lost lives because we depended on a certain information being true. Those things matter to me, separate from my story. Truth in media matters. Justice within the justice system matters. So you can think whatever you want about our story. I think our greater message is one of critical thinking, of due process, of the government not being able to dictate what grown adults choose to do in their bedrooms, things like that. So
I know Leah needs to leave, so I want to say goodbye and thank you for participating. I really appreciate it. I actually want to hear before we go what some of these things what has happened to you, like in what ways has the story disrupted or damaged your life. I know that you've gotten, you know, hate mail, etc. I'd like to, you know, keep open the opportunity for you to talk about the things that you know other people experience that are not like yours, in a way that you know, might illustrate to people that you do recognize that people could have different and negative experiences, and not have it be vicious or vindictive for them to express that. Does that make sense? Or do you think that everybody is vicious and vindictive who's expressing the negative? I didn't think you did. Okay. So
no, they're still our friends. We care about them. We understand, but the things that have objectively happened, you know, like people lost their jobs. You know, I'll speak for myself personally. Just the mere fact that I'm still friends with people here, I'm disowned by my family. Like, just the fact that, you know, and why would I do that? It's not because I don't want to have that connection with my family. And that's also the complete opposite of what cult's supposed to do. You know, ESP helped me bridge the relationship with my family. So, you know, and it's, and quite gave me very, very good tools to have compassion for them, even though I see how they struggle with this. My whole for me to stand up for what I believe in and is really important. If it were just for me, I wouldn't be here, honestly. But for the fact, as Nicki says, you know, I'm a lawyer. I believe in the justice system. I believe, but with bad people doing bad things, it corrupts the whole system. There's no due process. There's trial by media. People have lost their jobs. People have been disowned, like myself. And I just can't allow this to happen, knowing that it could happen to me, because that's happened to me, where people that have known me my entire life believe something that's in the media that I know for sure is not true, just because it's in the media. If it can happen to me with my pedigree, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah, for sure. There's always there are always things that the media get incorrect. I think they're notorious at this point for that. You know, and also I want
Why don't people think of that in this case? Why not? We know this happens. We know this happens in the justice system as well. Innocent men are guilty, and people just have amnesia when it's happening. In this case, they can't see it. It's possible. What if it was 1% possible?
let's talk
I
about
have a
that. I
question.
think it would
I'm
be
sorry.
interesting. Oh yeah, who has a question?
I do, Pamela, it's Ellen,
Yeah.
but I don't know how to raise my hand,
Oh,
sorry.
got it. Uh-huh.
Is that okay if I ask a
Yeah,
question?
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Technology is not my friend, sorry. Linda, I think what you were saying makes a lot of sense. I think that in various places, you know, just to kind of emphasize that I hear what you're saying, and what Nicki said that preceded it. I think there's a lot of places where we've all learned in different areas of our lives, the media and the court system takes a script and runs with it and has serious consequences. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. But I guess one thing that I wanted to ask, and it comes from a 5-second experience story, but it's related. I had done a group seminar that had, you know, some elements of similarity with a basic training and a advanced training and a leadership group kind of thing at one point, and had shared information. I mean, I'm going back 20, 30 years, had shared information about it with my friends because I loved them and I wanted them to better themselves, you know, much like I imagine you guys felt. And I had one particular friend who really wasn't suited for the training. It really impacted him. You know, he didn't have the mental health for it. He wasn't, you know, and he thought he did, and I obviously thought I did, you know, he did, and it was all out of great intention. And the reason I say that, and to say it messed him up is an understatement. It just triggered a lot of things for him and was catastrophic. And of course, I felt that it was my responsibility and I broke my friend. But the point of telling that story is, you know, Nicki, you mentioned, and I respect, like Pamela mentioned, she did too, your statement that this was a work in progress, and as things evolved, you found what didn't work and wanted to improve it. I guess the thing that I would love for you guys to explain to me is, you know, people might not be as strong and maybe far more fragile than you guys whose faces we're facing. And with that in mind, it's very hard for non-professionals and even for professionals to know those who might break or say yes when they really should be saying no. What is it that protected you and them from recruiting people or offering this to them when, you know, as lawyers and PhDs and whatever, we're not equipped to know that? That's my question. Is that a fair question? Does that make sense?
Angelica, did you want to say something?
I was just acknowledging the question. I think it is a great question. I think, I don't know, Nicki, if you want to answer.
Well, I do want to point out that if I thought I was part of something that I got invited to by a friend that was actually a way to get me to have sex with a man who was the head of an organization, that would be problematic. If I believed a lot of the things were true about the narrative, that would be problematic. And I think something that's important for people to know is that to the best of my knowledge, because of course I can't, I wasn't there for everything, I didn't know everyone, but to the best of my knowledge, people were thriving and happy, and although things were being worked out, there weren't problems until it became public and until certain people who were outside of the group started spreading rumors about what it actually was. And I know, there was one person that I had invited who called me so afraid and crying and saying that they couldn't tell me the terrible things because they had signed an NDA. So the people who were spreading the rumors had people sign a non-disclosure to not say that they spoke to anyone and learned these alleged things that were going on that weren't going on, but they couldn't even go and find out whether they were true or not because they'd signed this NDA. So it put people in this very difficult position. So I couldn't even help this person or share the information or answer the questions. And they were devastated. And I believe that they genuinely felt devastated because our relationship was so genuine, was so pure. We'd gone through, her quitting a job, and I felt so much care for this person, but they believed something about what was going on that wasn't true. And so I do believe that they genuinely felt that, and that had very negative effects, but it wasn't because of what was going on in DOS. It was because of what people who were outside of it was saying was going on in DOS. So I want to make that distinction. I know that wasn't exactly your question, and I do believe your question is valid. I do think what we were doing, although maybe it was edgy, it also wasn't that crazy. Like it would be if you failed on let's say you committed to exercise and you didn't, you might have to take a 1-minute cold shower. Like, I do think what we were doing was bold in our idea of it, but the practice was not something that would break someone. Like it wasn't, the reality of it was very gentle and caring and
and also think about this, just pace this. If these were men, would we even be having this discussion?
I don't know the answer to that, but what I do want to say, two things. One is I got, where did it go? The thing about the NDA is it's interesting because that's essentially what the collateral was for keeping the group secret. It's a non-disclosure agreement, right? With a penalty for disclosing. So it seems like there's some parallel there between what people were expected to be able to say and not be able to say, and to whom. I don't know what else the person wanted to say about that, but the other thing about Ellen's question, which I think is interesting, is that she's talking about a program that was never considered a cult, as far as I know. It was just a regular, human growth and development program. And so the fact that people had negative experiences doesn't mean that, I think
doesn't negate it. No. And that totally could be a possibility. The problem is it's hard to know because of the misconceptions and the lies. So we don't really know who just wasn't right for the program versus who was convinced it was something sinister and that scared them. Like we can't know now because of the narrative.
I think
that's created, that's new. You've got to figure that out. Medicine, when it first started years and years and years ago, we didn't know how to diagnose people. You look at a constellation of symptoms and you figure out what that symptom constellation looks like. But you do that by proposing something new and learning about it and figuring it out. That doesn't mean it's criminal. That doesn't mean it was done, and that there was anything wrong that was being done about it. And I think it's just important to point out that because of the false narrative, because of the filter that people have been threaded, and Helica, you may want to speak to this as a psychologist too, but there's a certain filter that people see this through because inherently their first experience of it was this false narrative. So now if you have cult in the back of your mind and that's the filter you're looking through, all you do is look for evidence to match that filter. And that's a very specific psychological process that we all do. You know, once you buy a car, you never thought that car existed before and now you see it everywhere. You know, so we haven't had a chance to tell our narrative in a pure way at all. And in fact, people just keep looking through this filter and looking for ways in which our story matches that narrative versus dropping the filter for a second and trying to hear something new.
So, you know, one thing about that, which maybe to look at that like from a slightly elliptical angle, is that I think people are actually really, many people anyway, I think a lot of people here too, are very, are open-minded and curious and we're expecting to hear more, like, here are the ways that it went sideways, but here are the things that we liked about it and what
Well, it clearly went sideways. I mean, that's
right.
Obvious.
But
I mean, talk about failures. I mean, this, I don't know, as far as we know, the first like all women's like mentorship secret sorority, you know, I mean, couldn't be a bigger failure, I think, publicly, right? I mean, it is, right? Not the intention. And a lot of these things weren't meant to be ever public either.
Yes.
And that's why, because when people say, well, why the secrecy? Well, because when you don't understand these practices, they take it out and people think that they're operating under the assumption that people dictated this and you have to do this versus understanding this is just a practice to understand why we did these things, you know, and there are all these different, you know, it could be from the beginning of time, different practices that people will be like, you're crazy to do that. Yes. And it's painful. Yes, that's the point. And it's challenging. Yes. Uncomfortable. Yes, that is the point, to get us out of our comfort zone. So that's, you know, people are like, well, why secrecy? I mean, clearly this is exactly why, because we didn't want to put ourselves out on judgment, mostly mainstream America, who doesn't understand these, doesn't necessarily have the value of personal growth, doesn't understand why you would ever knowingly deprive yourself of something. It's obvious why it's the secret. This is not our intention.
Ellen's point is, I mean, I want to keep coming back to that because there is a sense that, I mean, all of you are obviously incredibly strong and obviously got a tremendous amount of benefit out of all of the work that you did. And probably, I mean, I don't know if you would have been able to withstand the criticism that you are taking on now if you hadn't gone through the work, tremendous amount of work that you've gone through. Obviously, there are a tremendous amount of positives to what you gained. And what Alan was pointing to is that even in programs that are not, you know, tagged as something cult, you know, as a cult or involved with something criminal or, you know, any of the negative things that have been claimed about NXIVM or DOS or ESP, even in whatever, you know, other programs there are people who really have very, as Jeff I think put in the chat, catastrophic responses. He's saying to being in a cult, but I think that people have catastrophic responses to even the level of
just in life. Everybody. Yeah. I mean, there's no reason why this would be any different than any other group, any other microcosm of society.
Right. But what the thing is, though, that you have the opportunity to do is to express the kind of compassion and empathy that one would expect for people who broke in these, you know, in this situation. Well, and I think that people are saying like that will make, you know, then it's easier to hear what you have to say about the positives.
Well, I think the breaking, I didn't experience that happen so much in DOS as much as it happened as a result of the exposure of DOS and how it happened. You know, like Leah reminded us the other day, like the Frank report came out with a list of like 100 women, and we were, I think all of us were on it, and also women were on that list who weren't in DOS. All of a sudden, you know, I had I had a thing with one woman. I gave her something. I trusted her with it. We were doing it for 2.5 years. And all of a sudden my photo and my name is on the internet as a sex cult person, as a sex slave. That's humiliating, and that happened to over 100 women. That's traumatizing.
And what happened to you as a result of that?
Well, what I'll say is that was just the beginning, so for my, I'm sitting there like, what are they talking about? Because that's what I mean by watching the story unfold before your eyes. If it were that, I'd be like, yeah, get me out. Why wouldn't I? Because there was, tickets going out. But I was like, this is, whoa, my personal life, personal things about me, my likeness, my image are now being tied to something that I didn't give anybody permission for. And nobody's talking about that. So it's not like we're here because we're trying to destroy anyone. We're a group of people who are clearly committed to building things, who care about the well-being of other people. And we've seen people be punished and, suffer consequences that don't make any sense to us based on what we know from our lived experience. Personally, when I met with the prosecution that was, on this case, and because I was like, clearly they don't understand and I can help because I know a lot. I know Allison, I know a lot of people, and they were telling me about my experience. That's when I realized this was not so much about finding out the truth. This was that's when I realized, oh, they're trying to make this a thing. Like something that I thought was just in the media. Even me naively having been in social justice work, studying media in college, knowing that you can't believe everything you read, I thought the justice system, I thought they would sort it out. I thought it was good that they were looking into this because they would realize that the things in the media were bogus. That's not what happened,
So I know we need to wrap this up, and I really, really appreciate your time. You were talking about the justice system, and I do want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about that before we wrap up, because you all are very adamant that the crimes that people have been convicted of were not, didn't happen, and that these convictions are not just. So I want you to, and somebody asked something specific about this. Let's see, it was like a list of things. If I can find it, tax crimes, money laundering, immigration issues. So those apparently are the things that, in addition to the, let's say the, trafficking thing is off the table. Okay, let's assume that nobody who had sex with Keith was trafficked. Let's just set that aside for a moment and address the rest of the things. What about the rest of that?
I'm happy to address that very briefly, but I mean, I say briefly because I mean, that's a pretty big question you're asking, and it's a big topic there that's very complex. But I've actually been spending a lot of times for the last 6 months or so studying the charges, studying the transcripts, going through a lot of them. And actually, the charges, the elements, they didn't fit the charges. So that's part of what we're talking about when we're talking about justice and prosecutorial misconduct and misrepresentation, is that the whole process of how this was set up is a joke in itself. And I think that's something that we're about to reveal and bring out. But if you actually start to look at the charges, I don't have a legal background, but also Linda has been looking over some of these things, and we've been consulting with other people. If you actually start to look at what the charges are, the elements have never been proven for most of the cases. So.
Well, that will be an interesting.
And the main thing too, a lot of the things that the media focus on, are not crimes. People ask about all these practices, the branding, the diet, all those things. Let's just even say, with underage or possession of child porn, which is a whole other topic. But he was not charged with having sex with anybody. That was not even a crime. Do you think then why people are making it such an issue, and in this case?
Well, that's why I said I wanted to set
Right.
that aside.
So he was
set
not
that
charged with
aside.
rape. He was not charged with any of those crimes. Why not? And even though
And-
people saying that in the media, who also, by the way, not testified at trial, not sworn under oath, not cross-examined.
So,
The
obviously,
biggest people who were out there saying their story never testified at all.
obviously people are somewhat fascinated with unusual sex lives, right? People like to read books about it and watch movies about it. And so having the opportunity to talk to people who might have been involved in an unusual sex life is, I think some of what
Excels.
I would love to talk to those
Excels,
people
yeah,
too. I'm
because
fascinated, 'cause
basically,
it
yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's where some of these questions are coming from a level of curiosity and that it's not a socially customary kind of arrangement to have a harem of women. And, so, and also that can be associated with some coercive practices. And so, all of that gets sort of blurred together. But setting all of that aside, the I'll be interested to follow if you come up with things to legally challenge the convictions and see what happens. That will actually be incredibly fascinating. That would be a very interesting layer.
Well, that'll be the complete opposite of, using the vow and these documentaries as people's proof. So we're going to the transcripts and we're actually evidence, proof, conclusive things, facts. If you like facts and data and actual evidence, stay tuned.
Yeah, well, so that'll be.
And just to add that onto that, if anyone is interested, there's been an appeal that's been submitted on the whole case, and actually that goes through a lot of exactly those points.
That'll be interesting. The last question I want to ask before we wrap up, because this is a question that people have asked a number of times in the chat and also ask me about all the time when I talk about, my interest in your lives, your experience, etc., is the idea of the brand and the fact that it ended up being Keith's initials and people weren't told that it was Keith's initials. I would imagine that is probably something you all regret as a function of how some people might have felt about it afterwards. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. What do you think about the fact that people were told that the brand meant one thing but weren't told about the initials?
I can speak a little bit to that. So the way I can describe it the best is you don't really, like, when you go into any type of commitment, anything, you don't really know what it's going to take. I didn't know what it was going to take to have children. Like, I didn't know I was going to be in an emergency situation and have an emergency C-section, right? Like, that was not what I signed up for at all. And I think the most important thing, at least for me, was the intent. Like, I didn't sign up for knowing absolutely everything and having to know absolutely everything before I signed up for something. That's not even possible in my perspective. So I think when people, decided to get the brand, and then, some people, like, I knew there were some people other than myself designing it, and, I was shared that it was going to be a brand, and that was it. I honestly think that a lot of what went on was the people probably, the intent was a little bit mixed up, and people decided that people had bad intent towards that, which I honestly don't think. And I don't have a brand myself. I would have wanted to have my brand because I was really looking forward to it, because it meant a commitment to myself and to my master. And to be honest, to me, it didn't really make that much of a difference if it was his initials or someone else's initials. It was just something that was really meaningful for me.
Did any of you have any sort of like even second thought when you found out that it was Keith's initials? Did anybody go,
I can just share my perspective, and that's just honest, you know, like I knew there was going to be a brand. I didn't know that it was going to be his initials. And I honestly, when I found out, I was shocked, and I wouldn't have been happy about that. I honestly wouldn't have, honestly, for sure. But even if that's the case, I knew that didn't mean that that turn, just because it happened to be his initials, that changed the whole nature of the organization. It doesn't work like that. I for sure wouldn't have been happy, honestly. It doesn't change the intent and the meaning.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. You know, the framing of it. I'm glad to hear you say that. I mean, I think that's the sort of
we're people. Like, we're not the, you know what I mean? It's just like, and I'll just say, yeah, I didn't want to say it, but like, yeah, in retrospect, big mistake, I think. But I wasn't part of the design committee, so I'll just say that. But in retrospect, big mistake. Where it was placed,
on the
big mistake.
You
know, I'm sorry, Nikki's smiling, so I'm saying like, okay, big mistake. Who here has not made a mistake? But this is where we're human. We made a lot of mistakes. You know, and then you share this with any guy, and any guy's like, what were you women thinking? Like, husbands saying this too. They were like, what were you thinking? We're like, well, we tried, we were ambitious, and you know, and it's just like, look what happened. Yeah.
So I just want to thank you all. There are a lot of messages now in the chat thanking you. You all have been fabulous. Trisha says, I want to thank the panelists.
Maybe not so much even, but that's okay. We're still.
No, I missed something. Maybe not so much what?
I mean, it's maybe not so much fabulous, or maybe not what people wanted or expected.
No.
That's okay. That's okay.
You've all been amazing, really honest, really open. I really appreciate you, you know, taking on the challenge of talking to people who are like everybody who doesn't know you personally, who has preconceptions or has learned things about the vow or about read things in the news. And also, you know, my professor friend here who has a background in indoctrination and cults, who is seeing things that is you know, concerning to him, and that you were willing to engage with him in such a human and you know, amazing
Bring it on.
way.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it. And yeah, so somebody's saying, I wish Nicki answered the question about the brand. I think Nicki answered the question, that she probably wishes that it had not been Keith's initials.
I mean, I just think it's been taken completely out of context and contorted to fit a narrative, and I feel sad about that. I don't think there was any bad intent or intent to deceive. We naively thought people wouldn't know. It would just be a you know, it was a symbol, and it did actually have other meanings. There was significance to the design beyond that, and that's what it was. And it really was more about us all having this and going through the experience together than anything. And certain practical things, like it had to have straight lines and be a certain size. Like it's just not. And so I feel sad that people feel hurt, and obviously we never would have wanted that, but I do think it's been contorted in a way by people who don't really have the best of intentions.
And also there may be, you know, people who have a different interpretation of it, whether they're, you know, even if their intentions are, you know, benign, but, you know, having a different association with having a man's initials tattooed on them, you know, or maybe a different idea of what Keith's intentions were. Then
yeah, I didn't mean to imply that I think anyone who has those feelings doesn't have good intentions. I mean more how it's been used in the media narrative.
I see.
More
Yeah.
so, rather than seeking, being like coming to a friend and being like, dude, what the hell, you know, and having that conversation and talking about it. I think it could have gone a lot differently.
Well, I think one thing we can all agree on is that the media does not do a good job of representing facts in general. So, you know, we should all sort of take what we read in the news with a grain of salt. Obviously, some reporters are better than others, but even the best reporters get things wrong. So, on that note, I want to thank you all for sharing your perspectives, and thank everybody who participated in the call. And I'm really happy to see a wide-ranging and open conversation, which is rare in any context.